to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Been growing a lot, actually. We've gotten, I think our listenership is up 68% since the start of the summer. So we've almost doubled our audience since the start of the summer. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. No, it feels like you guys have hit kind of like a critical mass. It's like, it's sort of seems like the place to be to, figure out what's going on. If something's hot, you guys will do an episode. I mean, it really has become
Or an emergency episode,
Yeah. No, I feel like I made it. I'm on crosstabs. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jeremy Rogers from the Oregon Realtors Association. So Jeremy is, I would just, kind of, I'm sure you got a title, but we'll just say you're in charge of government affairs. I mean, all things external, internal for the Oregon Realtors Association. We should probably make that clear, right? So for the statewide association.
Correct. Yeah. And then we have about 20, 22 local associations.
Was it that many? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That each, handle the issues at their state and local level, county and city issues.
And that's like PMAR, Mid-Willamette Valley, COAR over here in Bend, Central Oregon. That's what you're like Rogue Valley down Southern Oregon. That's what you're talking about.
Yep.
And there's 22 of those. I always thought there was like 5.
No, yeah. Well, you named the big ones, but we've got there are many more. There's been some consolidation, it's Central Oregon is no longer Central Oregon. It's Cascade East Association of Realtors.
Oh, that's right.
They merged with a couple associations that had previously been independent. But so I think we're down from like 25 maybe a few years ago. But
did you know that I was the local government affairs director for COAR for like 2 years?
Which period of time?
Would have been after our oldest was born because Vicky went on leave and then she told them, well, Brian can do it.
Yeah.
Vicky was the GAD, obviously. So
that job's open again. So
did Tyler leave? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Tyler started a new gig with some federal group. So he's doing it remote. It's a trade association. I'm trying to remember what it is. It sounded like really, really boring.
Most of the work we do is boring.
And I think he's doing like regulatory policy stuff.
I think I'm good where I'm at, but I appreciate the opportunity. That board has really changed a lot just because the thing with realtors I always find interesting is one, the associations are very diverse. So, because you literally have everybody from the most ardent conservative to the most liberal, person, and then literally everybody in between, right? So, I mean, realtors, the association, I mean, the people that I know that are actual realtors, members, they truly run the gambit of political society, but they believe mostly in private property rights, home ownership as a key goal for people because that's your number one wealth builder in life. Like there are some things that bind, realtors together politically, and that's usually where you try to weave that scenario is like, how do we make because I think ultimately the goal is how do we make homeowners, right, out of people, because we know that's good for the industry and that's good for people individually. But then there's all the things that go into home ownership, which we deal with every day in the legislature, right, during a housing crisis, because all realtors want to do is sell more homes. They love selling homes. It's all about
but they're also key parts of their community. I mean, and our members serve on the local chambers of commerce. They're on local planning commissions. They're involved. They're coaching their kids' soccer team, and obviously they want to sell more houses, but they want their communities to thrive. And to your point, we really do. We're very reflective of the overall, political diversity in Oregon. I say, frankly, if if you look at our membership, it's probably about a third, a third, a third between registered Republican, registered Democrat, and then non-affiliated. And to your point, we call it the realtor party, those issues like that we, all rally around and unify around. And I think it's actually really nice because I think it's where a lot of people are at. A lot of people look at the various parties and there's things they like, there's things they don't like about them. But, there's, I think, a majority of Oregonians who support small businesses, who support more homeownership opportunities, who support private property rights. And those are the things that our members are about and that unify on regardless of political affiliation. So it's a good space to be in because I think it's the right place, and I think we're in line with where Oregonians are at.
Is the challenge, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to ask it anyways, just because most of our listeners probably don't know the ins and outs of the Realtors Association. But I always find it, because you have PMAR, which is probably more on the left side of the equation, like their membership would be, right? And then you have maybe like Rogue Valley, that's a little bit more on the right side of that. And occasionally you guys clash sometimes, like usually over like local measures, maybe, or it's usually not candidates, because I don't think that really gets, because they kind of do the local stuff and then you guys kind of do the legislature stuff. And so there's really not too much clashing there. But I would imagine sometimes on the measures we get a little sideways.
I don't really see it I don't really see it. I mean,
Okay.
very often, and I can't think of a particular example. And the reason I think is because those issues we unify around, they're all of our members are small business owners. So, if you're, talking about people who might disagree on social policy or other things, when it comes down to fiscal policy and regulations and things that matter to small businesses, really across the aisle, our members are unified. So, for example, our members were leading force to defeat that capital gains tax that was in Portland a couple of years ago. And, it's interesting because, people say, well, if you have people on the right and they ask, well, where are the, fiscally conservative Democrats or, the small business Democrat? Well, in our membership, there's one place they are, right? I think folks really just unify across those issues.
I was thinking of like maybe some school board measures, school bonds, but that's probably, maybe there's some metro stuff that I could see occasionally you guys might, and maybe it's not button heads, but it's kind of like, hey, we don't want to take a huge role. Usually it's just what level of role you want to play in a campaign or something. You can say, well, we're just going to stay on the sidelines on this, but I guess you're probably not going to be on opposing sides of issues per se.
Well, and also, the way our associations work is like, if a local association, other than those big ones that you mentioned, if a local association wants to get involved in a local measure, they have relatively limited resource at the local level. So they'll come to the state, and we have a committee that reviews applications from locals to support things. And then NAR has a similar thing, right? And so, typically if there's going to be a significant investment, it's something we're all aligned on because it would require the local, state, and even potentially some resources from NAR.
Yeah, NAR has the big resources. We know that. But they like to play in those congressional races and all that sort of craziness. So, which I don't know, we're going to see much of that this next cycle in Oregon. I don't know how much we're gonna play in those congressionals. I would say probably not a whole bunch.
Yeah, I think it seems a little different than last time
Did
around.
they get it? Do you remember? Did NAR get involved with the Southwest Washington congressional race? Did they back Joe Kent or MGP?
Oh my gosh. Well, was she an incumbent at the last? She was incumbent at the last one, right? Yeah. So um, I don't remember the details, but they probably, um, NAR. If an incumbent's been good for us, NAR really has the back of incumbents generally. So, taking on supporting a challenger against an incumbent who's been even decent on our stuff is not very common for NAR.
Yeah, that's probably, well, for most groups, that's not it's not a common thing unless you are Um, Reagan, what's the Jewish organization?
AIPAC?
APAC, yeah,
APAC.
yeah.
APAC has no problems. Like if you're anti-Jewish, like let the world rain down on you. So they're kind of funny. We just got some people back from that. We were asked to go on that thing over to Israel and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. They. It's amazing. Every cycle they put together, or maybe it's every two. Yeah, it's every 2 years they put together kind of a list, and they always want, even all the way down to state legislatures to go over to Israel. They like to see representation from every state over there, and they tend to get it. I mean, it'd be a cool trip to go on. I mean, it'd be way better than going to like Denmark or something, but um, I'm always afraid of the backlash. Like, I mean, we literally just saw it, like, what is it in the Capitol Chronicle the other day, right? It was like, oh, two Oregon legislators, on the free junket in Israel, and it's like you
Yeah,
get.
well, I just want to say thank. I want to, as a Jew, I want to say thanks to Rep. Gomberg and Rep. McIntyre. I think it's important, obviously, for people to be on the ground and understand what's going on. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of silly to give them crap for wanting to have a closer look at what's going on, so that they can um, you know, assess the situation, I've been to Israel before. It's a wonderful experience. I'd encourage anybody who has the opportunity to go. I mean, obviously, um, you know, people would assess quite a bit of risk right now in making a trip, but that's always the case, right? There's never been a time
The
where
only
there
risk is
isn't
that you're Palestinian. I don't think
some
there's a
risk
risk
involved.
if you're.
So, yeah.
Well, I think one, I didn't know you're Jewish, but we Reagan and I are unwavering supporters of Israel on the crosstabs. It's by far and away, and we're coming up on that anniversary too of that horribleness that started all of this off. And I've always loved Senator Fetterman. So we just said, well, the war could end tomorrow. The Palestinians they have to surrender, and
Exactly.
and they won't. And so I always call for Israel to cease fire and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, until Hamas and all the crazies leave it alone, which they never will. So how can you can't. Israel gets so much flack for just trying to survive and protect their homeland and what they have. And I don't discount the Palestinians' desire to fight their own thing, but you lost. Like, I mean, sorry, but you lost, and the victors goes the spoils, and that's just the way the world works. And then they're the ones that keep attacking. Like Israel was fine, and then October 7th hits, right? So it's I don't know. We don't need to get too political. I'm sure
Well,
it's not
yeah,
really.
not to drag more, and Jeremy, you don't have to respond, but there's these countries that are now recognizing the Palestinian state, which of course doesn't exist, but they've had opportunities to have it exist, and every time it's been a negotiated thing. I mean, Carter did it, Clinton did it. It's been rejected every time, right? And so that's one of those things where it's like they're taking a pretty hardline stance on it and how they feel about it. And the hardline stance is some of them don't want Israel to exist, and then a lot of them don't want Israel to exist as it does today, right? And so that's where they stand. So right, like that's your point, is they've chosen the path that they're on right now. It's a very self-determined determined thing. And also now they want $2 trillion worth of reparations from the UK since they recognize their state, which I think is pretty hilarious.
I think they have a saying. It's called like "river to the sea" or something. Yeah.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate no, I mean I appreciate you both being ardent supporters and talking about this on the podcast, and I think it's a worthy topic for more discussion even on your podcast too. I mean, it's just it's interesting to me. To your point, right? It's nobody and Brian too. Like nobody is calling for you know what Hamas needs to do. Nobody's asking. It's like there's no agency there, right?
yeah.
And it's like, hey, if this is what you want, if you want there to be an end to violence, if you want this to stop, why are you only asking one side? And why are you only asking the one side that's been attacked? The one that was originally attacked that didn't start the war. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to figure that out as to why folks don't see sort of that there's agency on both sides of this.
It really is. And Hamas is the one with the agency that they're not choosing to lay down their weapons. And I think it's kind of like the Ukraine thing as well with Russia, right? I mean, you're not going to get a ceasefire unless both sides, they're both going to have to give up something, right? And Hamas, what Hamas doesn't want to give up is they don't want to give up their guns, they don't want to give up their ability to basically attack Israel again, because we know that they won't change their mind until Israel is annihilated. And they've said this, so it's not until there's no Jews on the face of the planet, or at least in their backyard, they're just going to regroup. I remember back in I think when Reagan references, you guys talk about like the 80s and stuff, there used to be, I think Clinton even said it, only thing you can really do is like just knock them back 10 years every now and again. So you just bomb them to just kind of knock them back 10 years, and then you wait until they build up enough strength and guns, and then they're gonna attack again. And I just think, and it's our ally over there. We have to have a democracy in the Middle East on some level. Israel's been proven to be a true ally of America, and we got to have a base to go fight the Saudis and all the other ones from. So I don't know. We don't really dive into international relations too much on here. This is probably more than we should be doing already. But I'm glad to see that you're part of the Team Israel. So I've always stood with Israel, and I think more people should on the state level speak up a little bit more, because I think we let people get a pass on some of that stuff, and they shouldn't. So
Yeah, no, I think there's been I mean, the 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 fact that being aligned with Hamas is the progressive value, like I don't really understand that, and the fact that that hasn't been challenged more is really concerning. And I think it's part of this broader issue of normalization of violence that we're seeing. But it really happened after October 7th, when you had people cheering on October 8th. It wasn't just until after Israel had responded. It was right then that you
yeah,
had some of these responses. So I think that's something we really have to reckon with here in the U.S. as part of our political culture.
yeah. I had a I don't want to talk about it. I had a Palestinian girlfriend at one point, way, way, way back when, but I don't want to talk about it. Maybe on a different podcast. Vicky might get mad at me. But that was one of the things that we couldn't get past, right? Like it was just a very hard line, and there's a hard line group in that Tiger area that's pretty hard line. They were all going to Portland State. It's back when I was in college at Portland State, but it was very difficult to be around, people that have a very hardline approach to that. I think it's just, I don't know. I kind of stop at killing people. I think that seems to be a little much, political disagreement, especially in the wake of, man, the Charlie Kirk stuff and all the things. Like, let's just talk and figure some things out, because he was right. He said, once you stop talking, you start fighting.
Well, Brian, and I'll get on to the other issue we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
but there's a book that I was reading, and I'm reading, and I was reading at the time of the Charlie Kirk assassination, and it just really hit home. And the book I'm reading is about that we actually could resolve a lot of our issues we have with each other and actually get to better outcomes if we embraced our disagreements and arguments. And it's looking at the way that that Jews historically and rabbis have studied the Talmud and encouraged the disagreement because it gets you closer to the truth. And they call it argument for the sake of heaven. And the idea is, it's not, we shouldn't be afraid of disagreeing or arguing, but we should recognize that those differences we have, those arguments we have, get us closer to the truth. But that's what you have to want to be seeking. You've got to want to be seeking truth, not just demonizing or having enemies. And so, and that's something that I think Charlie Kirk really believed and encouraged those types of arguments. And you can agree or disagree with his opinions, but the solution isn't less disagreement or less argument. It's disagreeing and arguing because we want to get to a better place, and being okay with that instead of shutting off our arguments and resorting to violence.
Hmm. It's so true. Yeah, I think it's my son, Alex, our oldest son, he was at the Charlie Kirk Memorial all day yesterday down there in Arizona, and he said it was just truly eye-opening and mesmerizing for him, a 19-year-old boy, right? To kind of see that sort of stuff. And we had a long conversation this morning just about that whole idea that it's okay. Like you don't know the answers to everything. I don't know the answers to everything and who you're talking to, but man, you guys, that's what you should be doing in college is, battling on the ideas, right? Talking about solutions to problems and stuff, especially as that Generation Alpha, Generation Z, like they're going to be taking over, the world from us old coggers, at some point, and their voice could be huge in how they go into the workforce and how they're tackling issues and talking with each other. And they're more and more putting their cell phones down now. Like it's really, I think they're rejecting some of the social media stuff and really starting to learn to have conversation. And I mean, maybe this is just a microcosm of him and his friends, but they're having like they call them disagreement nights, which is kind of
Nice.
fun.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
it's kind of neat. They said they get together and they'll try to pick topics where they know they're going to disagree on, and then they try to like explain each other's point. I think this stuff's great, man. I used to love debating when I was in college and that was half the fun of going to college was
Totally. Yeah.
arguing with my little left liberal friends at Portland State University, which there was a lot of them at Portland State University when I was there, still is, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And I hope they enjoyed my perspective. I was one of two Senate Republicans on Portland State's Student Senate. I think there's 23 and then 23 Ds and two Republicans. So it's a lot like the legislature. So that's why, I can operate there. Well, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about floodplains in Oregon
Yep.
and FEMA, which, we love the federal agency that deals with emergency management, basically is trying to meddle into floodplains and insurance and all the things. And you've kind of been spearheading this effort with some other folks to basically one, bring this to light, right? Like bring people to know this is happening and the fact that Oregon has a lot of floodplains. And so this is obviously a huge issue for homeowners and people who live in or near floodplains. So
Yep.
maybe kind of explain what's happening, like give me kind of the 10,000
Yeah.
foot view and we'll try to like narrow it down.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I'll do my best. It's been a long history on this, but it's really hot at the moment, and there's an opportunity for people to comment, and that's why I think it's really important to talk about it now. So, so the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, runs the National Flood Insurance Program. If you live in a floodplain, in what they call the 100-year floodplain, it's not really accurately named. It essentially means that there's a 1% chance in any given year that there might be a flood in that area. Well, you have to, if you want a federally backed mortgage, you have to have flood insurance if you're in that area. Most people get that through FEMA, through the National Flood Insurance Program. There's not a lot of private or other options available outside of the NFIP to get that flood insurance. It also is what qualifies you to get federal disaster assistance should there be a disaster. So the NFIP has been around since the 60s. And as part of that, the local governments, the cities and the counties, they implement minimum development criteria in their floodplains that allows them to qualify for the NFIP. So FEMA basically sets out through a rule, hey, here's some of the things you need to do to make sure you're protecting people and property with your floodplain regulations. If you do those things, we'll let you into the National Flood Insurance Program. So that's the way it's worked for decades and really was working fine until FEMA was sued by environmental groups. The argument they made, this was back in 2009, was that your implementation of the National Flood Insurance Program in Oregon is causing harm to endangered species, specifically salmon, steelhead, and then the resident killer whale. And the FEMA settled with the environmental groups and says, okay, we'll consult with the National Marine Fisheries Service, another federal agency that consults with them on endangered species, to have them determine whether we're harming species with the NFIP in Oregon. And that resulted in a biological opinion from the National Marine Fisheries Service that said, yes, the implementation of the program is harming species in Oregon. And it's important to note this is just Oregon. We're not talking about some national change. This is specific to Oregon. Essentially, what the biological opinion said is that FEMA has to get to a no net loss of floodplain function standard in order to keep operating the NFIP in Oregon and be consistent with the Endangered Species Act. So what that means is that if anytime you build a structure or even store something in the floodplain long term, it's taking up space. Well, if it floods, then that space, the water can't go during the flood. So they call that a loss of flood storage. So if you're going to put anything in the floodplain, you have to mitigate to make up for any lost flood storage. Another one is pervious surface. So if you're putting any sidewalk or road into the floodplain, then you are causing water quality problems from runoff and such. So you have to mitigate and remove pavement from the floodplain to make up for that difference. And if you remove trees from the floodplain, you are now removing canopy that was shading streams that was, over time decomposing and providing habitat. And so you have to now plant numerous trees for every tree that you remove if you want to do development. So this was this no net loss concept. There's been back and forth litigation over a number of years on this. There was a delay that Representative DeFazio got for about 3 years in 2018. But ultimately, FEMA came up with a plan for how to implement this. And they went out for the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, review and did a draft environmental impact statement. And they released that in August. So now in that environmental impact statement, we have a clear sense of what they're asking for in terms of what type of mitigation would be required, and also a sense of what they have assessed are the impacts on things like the economy, transportation, as well as environmental impacts. And it's pretty significant. So I can tell you more about that.
Oof. So the thought process is, and I love when you talk about porous and non-porous surfaces and things like that, and trees, because I would think less trees, there's more dehydration. So maybe that actually takes away from flood opportunities. With shading, you don't get dehydration. Is it dehydration? Yeah.
Like evaporation. Yeah.
Evaporation. There you go.
Yep.
Dehydration is what I get when I'm working out. Tells you how smart I am. But the idea that somehow or another somebody's driveway is removing the ability of that water to stay so it doesn't continue down the flood line is just some of that stuff. It's hilarious. I think that's people, we thought about these people that sit around and come up with shit. I mean, this has to be one of those things somebody just sat around and came up with, like, oh, these streams, and then there's houses along the streams, and that's flood, it's floods, and then the water's not going to stay where it goes. Like, I don't get why that matters with the insurance side. So can you explain to me what?
Well, that's a big part of our concern. And, we are engaged in a federal lawsuit. Of course, the environmental groups have also sued, saying FEMA's not moving fast enough or going far enough. So, but yeah, the NFIP is a program that statutorily is designed to protect people and property and to issue flood insurance based on risks to people and property, not, a program to protect species or habitat or assess risks based on risks to species and habitat. And so, I think your point is spot on. A lot of these sort of theories that are undergirding this policy have nothing to do with protecting people and property, and in fact go the other way. For example, the draft EIS finds that this requirement for mitigation would cause a severe adverse impact to transportation systems, including safety projects, and that some projects would be delayed significantly and some would not go forward at all. Yet what we're talking about is a program that's designed to help protect people to improve safety with the flood insurance program. So it really just doesn't add up. And if you look at the impacts statement that they did, all the ones that affect people and property, it shows significant adverse impact. The only thing that their plan shows a benefit to is the species, yet the program is actually statutorily designed to protect people and property. They showed that the increase in construction costs for commercial and residential development, they estimated would be around 28.8%. I think that's probably an understatement. But that would be roughly $7,500 a year more in a mortgage payment for a home buyer. And what they found was that it's most likely that you would need a second parcel of land to complete this mitigation.
Right.
Yeah, where are you going to find that? And now you've halved the amount of developable lots in the floodplain, and then you have to dispose of the material outside of the floodplain. So to do a 1,500 square foot house, you have to remove 25 dump trucks worth of dirt from somewhere else in the floodplain to make up for the structure that you built, and you have to put that outside of the floodplain. And how are we going to do any of this within Oregon's land use system? I have no idea.
It's not possible because basically what they're saying is that for every structure you build, you got to tear one down, or right? That would be the equivalent,
or dig a hole, size or bigger.
And that's not. I mean, one, you could. I mean, if you have a big enough parcel of land that's all in the floodplain, theoretically, you could mitigate yourself, but that's a very small number of developments that are going to go forward. And so, I mean, basically, what this does is. If you thought we had a housing problem before this, we won't be building 36,000 units a year. We'll be building 36 units a year. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not insubstantial. They calculated in the draft impact statement sort of what percentage of housing over the last decade has been built in the floodplain. And I don't have the number in front of me, but it was somewhere between 10 and 15%. And of course, if you're in a community that a majority of your land is in the floodplain, for your community, it's a much larger percent. I mean, there's some where it's 30, 40. So this is not an insubstantial impact on the overall housing crisis. And a lot of people think we're entering recession territory right now. Overall impact on the economy too, particularly for these communities that some of them have their downtown core is in the floodplain.
Mm-hmm.
Also, not just for new building, it also touches on remodels and reconstruction, right? So if something were to happen and you have to rebuild now you have to fall under these rules. There's no grandfather clause, basically. So you're putting into, because I think their real goal, I mean, let's just be frank. I mean, the people that are pushing this, their real goal is no development. They don't want anything within these watersheds, within these river streams that they consider these luscious things. And they use species as a way to stop it. They say because they don't care about the impact to humans. They figure we can just spend our way around it. I mean, they just kind of shove it off on that. But really what you're doing is you're just creating a bigger gap between the rich and the poor again. You're not allowing people to enjoy what Oregon's, who doesn't want to have a house on the river in Oregon or near a river or near a lake or near something? I mean, or in the outdoors. I mean, the floodplain, looking at the map on your guys' website, the floodplainprotection.org or whatever. I mean, the map is basically all of Oregon is more or less affected, right? Unless you live in Burns. Actually, I think Burns is in there. And some like John Day, they got a significant amount of land in the floodplain, right? So it is, even in some, key Eastern Oregon communities. And they've had floods. I mean, Prineville's had a flood, I mean, we had a flood, 97 was our last 100-year flood. But, we have these things now, and they're called dams. I don't know if for these things, but it's supposed to store the water and then release it out so it doesn't flood. And so we've built up those dams and those mitigation things since 97, especially in my area, and I think other places have as well. So that, I mean, I'm thinking about Roseburg and some of these places where there's dams built up to allow for that flow of water. Sometimes, clearly, if you have a 100-year flood, it's going to overrun the dam and it just goes. But that's why you have the insurance to protect against that potential catastrophic event.
Yes. And based on the risk that's assessed to actual damage to people and property. And that's, if you look at the payouts, I mean, there has not been a lot of large losses in Oregon. Obviously, we've had, the 96 floods, you've had some, but overall, compared, you look at Louisiana, Florida, other places where they've had it, we haven't. And so it's like, it's really key that the program be keyed to the actual risks associated with the property that's being insured instead of these other species related risks that don't have anything to do with the property being insured.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to run an actuarial program to provide insurance and meet the underlying goals of, protecting the people and the property that need it if you're basing it on factors that are completely, different than what should be taken into account?
We were talking with, I had a meet, well, not we as crosstabs, but there was a group of us that met with ODF and W to talk about the Umpqua River and some closure of the habitat and stuff. And the biggest questions were really thinking like, and that's a big floodplain, big river coming down through there. But the biggest problem that we have is wildfire. Because wildfire burns through those watersheds, burns through those floodplains because we're in a drought on top of all of this. We're in a drought scenario and we have a bad management of our forests, especially around key watersheds because they think leaving them alone instead of managing them is the right thing to do. Well, when all that land burns, what happens is the soil erosion is just intense. And then that gets into the water. Then you have no more shade to keep the water, from heating up, which then that kills off the steelhead and the salmon downstream because you have warm water coming through instead of cold water, and then that brings all the smallmouth bass upriver, and then they're eating all the little fish. So really, wildfire is more of a problem than actual floods, and yet we do nothing to manage our forests for wildfire, which I would say has a bigger impact on all of those species combined with, except for some poor guy that put a 10 by 20 driveway in there that now has to, figure out a way to shove his soil somewhere. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
But also, I mean, you think about that, the groups that are on the other side of this, the environmental groups that are pushing this, they believe in the let it burn philosophy because they think that that's how, quote unquote, natural is supposed to go. Well, yeah, sure, natural on the land if nobody lived there. But actually, the fires absolutely wreck habitats besides cities and rural areas, right? And so you can actually properly manage your forest and reduce your total number of trees from like hundreds per acre or thousands per acre to low hundreds or high tens of trees per acre and have a healthy forest. And then a fire can go through there and not completely annihilate the habitat and not blow up, rural communities and encroach on cities. I mean, this is the thing is it's like you're talking about this, like the solution is to live in the city, but you know what burns down after all the rural area burns down? The cities, Talent was right on the border, right? Of Ashland and Medford area, right? That fire came all the way down very, very close to those two cities. So it's not like that's going to be a safe haven.
No, you're right. And these two things intersect. I mean, we did a briefing for our members today, and one of our members brought up and said, wait a minute, I'm being told I need to remove trees to be able to get wildfire insurance, to get homeowners insurance and do things to protect my home from wildfire. But right. if I add on to my house, I have to plant, in some instances, depending on how close you are to the stream and this plant, you have to plant 12 trees for every one you remove. So, these things aren't being developed with like any connection of like, how does it impact everything else?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't. Where's President Trump at on this? I mean, are we trying to get to him? Because it's only Oregon specific, so it's pretty hard to go that high up the chain to make him. And he could probably give two shits about Oregon, I think. But
I just don't think it's on his radar yet. I mean, I think it is. It's an Oregon specific thing, and. Yeah. We're working, with NAR and, of course we, talk to members of Congress and, so, we hope that the administration does, change course. I mean, obviously there's the legal issue. I mean, they were sued and the biological opinion was issued And FEMA is responding to that biological opinion. But it's also been 10 years since that biological opinion came out. And the biological opinion itself was on really shaky ground, and it didn't even take into account basic things like the actual level of development that's occurring, which they now have some more information on because they've done this EIS. So, I mean, one solution here would be to reinitiate that consultation and determine, based on the information we have now, whether this really makes any sense at all. And
The
that's
biggest
something that
problem
this administration
is,
could do.
and this is a thing that Democrats in government love to do, is whenever they get sued, especially by interest groups that typically are on their side of the aisle, their favorite thing to do is, instead of actually defend the government like they're supposed to, the attorneys are supposed to defend in court and argue the point of the current law, they just settle. They do this on transportation, and it's cost billions of dollars when it was only supposed to cost tens of millions of dollars. They don't argue the point because they don't like the bad PR that they get. Well, I'm sorry, but your job as these agencies is to execute the current law and not pretend like, oh, it looks really bad, and so we have to, we're just gonna negotiate a settlement with you guys. No, stop doing that. That needs to end. That's it. You should not settle unless it is very, very clear that you are going to lose the lawsuit. And as far as I can tell early on in this, I mean, this has been a long process. Very early on, you would not have been able to determine with any kind of accuracy whether or not the federal government was going to lose this in court or not. And you could have and may still have years worth of appeals left to do in state and or federal court, right? And so that it's bad. Frankly, it's bad legal work. It's bad lawyering. And that kind of bad lawyering needs to stop. They need to go back to going on the basis of the law, not on the basis of whatever, like the U.S. attorney or whoever's representing FEMA's lawyers saying, well, this looks bad, because this was 2009, right? The Obama administration didn't want to be anti-environment. They wanted to be pro-environment. And so what did they do? They settled this instead of arguing it and actually getting, because you know what you don't get good law from? These settlements. They create garbage law. And then the agency comes back and said, well, we made this settlement and it's binding in court, so now you have to put it in statute. And the legislative bodies, either the state legislature or the Congress, didn't have an opportunity to weigh in at all. It's basically lawmaking and bad lawmaking that happens in a courtroom instead of where it belongs. And it's done by the executive and the executive's lawyers and the agency heads instead of even the top executives, really. I mean, I don't even think the president probably weighed in on this. It was some relatively low level person that may have just been confirmed days ago by the Congress. That's just like, yeah, I'm not going to be on the bad side of these environmental groups. I need to go get a job after I'm done in the administration, right? So it's just garbage, and it needs to end. And it's a thing that it seems to be pretty prominent in blue states. We see it in Oregon a ton with other kinds of issues like the transportation one I mentioned and others. But it's got to end, because it really is doing damage to public policy. And these are fair public debates, but they need to happen in the settings where they belong, in the legislature and in the Congress. These debates do not belong in the courtroom. These are policy debates.
Yep. Well, and if you think, I mean, to your point, like this is absolutely against FEMA's interest. I mean, FEMA's interest, right, is in administering the National Flood Insurance Program, in addressing people and property. Yet, because of this settlement and that biological opinion, they're going forward with it. But to your point, that was the Obama administration. Then the draft plan came out during the Biden administration, and we really haven't seen yet. It's still early. This administration sort of weigh in with what they're going to do if they were to change course. But I think it's certainly. I hope it's something that they evaluate, because
if people don't have flood insurance, the other thing too is that it's just going to be more expensive for FEMA, because FEMA distributes a lot of different kinds of aid whenever there's major disasters. And so, what makes that more expensive? When people don't have insurance.
Yeah. Well, it's just
it's common sense. Heaven forbid.
You have to have insurance, and it's got to be backed. I mean, part of what the government's responsibility is, there's very few, and that's one, keeping my border safe, but also doing these things like providing FEMA-backed insurance for catastrophic events, right? I mean, it's saying that the government, the federal government, the full weight of our government will back somebody's house if a catastrophic event happens, right? And so, because they're saying that unless we cease to exist as a government, which you have bigger problems to worry about at that point, we can help, figure out natural disasters. And if it's in Louisiana, we go down there and help them. If it's wildfires in California, we go and help them. And that's the point of us doing it together. But to kind of do this weird little one-off in Oregon doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think, what's the FEMA director? I just pulled it up. Director Richardson. So we'll have to send Director Richardson at FEMA a few emails, and then what else? You have some stuff coming up, Jeremy. What's coming up that people can kind of?
Yeah, so I think for this, the big thing to know is that FEMA, by law, has to review public comments that come in on its draft plan and the environmental impact statement. It has to consider those comments, and it has to write up what it did with those comments, including if it changed its assessment, and ultimately it's going to decide on one of three alternatives. So the comment deadline is October 6th. Alternatives: one is the no action alternative, which essentially would be the NFIP as we know it without these changes. And 2 and 3 are just variations of what I described to you. And if you go to floodplainprotection.org, which is our coalition website, you can get more information there on how to comment. We have one-pagers. There's a public meeting, so people can attend that and they can deliver comment verbally. They can hear from FEMA more details about the plan and deliver comment verbally. You also can submit in writing by the 6th. The public meeting's on the 30th. But I think if Oregonians who care about this, either they're affected, for their own property or their business or their community is dependent upon economic activity in the floodplain and their neighbors, that they spread the word and reach out. And if enough people weigh in with information about why these alternatives 2 and 3 are really harmful, and that they undermine the purpose of the program, and that we need to stay focused on protecting people and property, then maybe this administration will listen to the voice of Oregonians and change course here.
We can only hope. Will they? If whatever they come up with, so they're required by statute to do this, and let's just say they don't choose number 1, right? Which is just leave it alone. They end up choosing number 2. Let's, for instance, does that have to be signed off by the president at some point, or is it because of the process we've gone through? It just becomes law, and then they go into rulemaking and all the things like we do.
Well, that's the other thing. They're not doing rulemaking, which is part of our lawsuit as well. So you would think that this nationwide program that's had these nationwide standards for development that communities have for decades, that's in rule, they're essentially modifying the rule just for Oregon through this plan without doing rulemaking. And so what happens is they go back, they take the feedback from the draft environmental impact statement comments, and then they have to, FEMA and National Marine Fisheries both have to agree, because it was the National Marine Fisheries that pushed FEMA into this to begin with. So if those two agencies agree, and I don't know if ultimately the head of Commerce signs off on it. I know FEMA or NOAA at least is under Commerce, right? And so, I don't know sort of how high up it goes in terms of who signs off, but both agencies would agree and pick the alternative, and then there's what's called a record of decision. And then after that record of decision, that's when they start working with the communities to implement.
Wow. I thought we were, getting rid of all this crap at the federal level, but there's so many layers in history of, like you said, this started in '09, so there's probably a series of all of these that are somewhere around the country that are going through similar process. They were all in a different state of, process. I just feel like maybe he could do an executive decision that just stops all of these things, and they all have to start over or something. I mean, that's the only way to really stop government creep, because it's not even, people always say like the deep state. You know what the deep state is in my mind? It's just pure bureaucracy, like just the I mean, outside of the CIA deep state, I think that's different. But it seems like our deep state is just this process-driven, slow mud coming down the hill that you can just watch, and it's just eventually going to overtake you. And it just feels like this is one of those things where everybody knows it's a bad idea, but it's just being pushed by a few small groups, and it just kind of has kept moving forward.
That's exactly what it feels like. And for someone who's been involved in it for a long time, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Ugh.
and it you throw up your hands because you say you explain it to someone, they say this can't be real. Like there's no way that this is what they're going to require, but it is real. And like you said, it just keeps moving forward, even though it doesn't make any sense to anybody.
I mean, I didn't even know until you shot me an email. I didn't even know it was even happening. I think that's part of the problem we have with these sort of things is there's so much stuff happening that we don't even know about. And we're, I would say, fairly in the know. At least we try to see, but we don't, like you said, it hasn't been anywhere, or Reagan was talking about, it hasn't been anywhere in the legislature's discussions or those sort of things where the lawmakers should be determining this stuff, not some crazy rule thing that's happening. And then ultimately the judges who don't know anything, they just go, well, that makes sense to me. I'm a judge.
Well,
And
this one's been so in the weeds. I think that's part of the issue is that it's so down in the weeds that people have avoided it. But to your point on the state legislators, I will say this. I mean, and to your point earlier, Reagan, about standing up for your own state, like this is bad for Oregon. FEMA's, you know, through NIMS trying to push something that will completely disrupt our land use system and our goals in Oregon that we have for ourselves around housing and economic development. So, why are more state leaders not stepping up and weighing in and saying, don't do this to us? And I think that would be really powerful if more Oregon elected officials would submit official comments on this, trying to protect the sovereignty of Oregon from this, overreach by the federal agency.
yeah, legislators, if you're listening, get on it. Get your staff to put something on letterhead.
Brian, I think we are the staff that might need to start putting stuff on letterhead and getting more people to do that. But
Yeah.
I just realized that.
Hey, staff, Reagan, I'm talking to you. Get something on letterhead.
Yeah, let me check in with Senator Anderson's office here real shortly. I'll send an email, see if they're interested. Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea though, Brian. So you may have some action that's generated from this, just a slowly podcast with no influence whatsoever anywhere.
Well, we have till October 6th, so I think, I was talking to Senator Anderson about it this morning, or actually this afternoon when we were having our staff meeting and just kind of talking about stuff. And we were talking about this podcast as far as this sort of thing, and being a coastal senator that he is. I mean, there's, everybody's in the floodplain. I mean, we're already dealing with so many other issues, that have to do with erosion and all these other things that you deal with already, on the coast and in those areas. But the idea that you have to do things for wildfire to remove trees, and then you have to now replace those trees the counterbalance to this just doesn't make any sense. So
I wonder how many houses on the coast butt up against trees and a national forest that could burn down are in the tsunami zone and in the floodplain. I bet that's an exciting place to live.
the Cascadia event, the joke on the coast is if there's they were like, oh, we got to have resiliency. And we're like, yeah, if the Cascadia events happen, you realize we're all dead. Like if you live on the coast, like you're not, like if we have a true Cascadia event, your ability to get off the coast and over to the valley is just, it's not going to be a feasible thing. So
Yeah.
if you're living over there, just, hang out and wait for the world to end. So,
But even absent the Cascadia event, just from just trying to give hope to people. Like, I mean, if you live in an area where, yeah, you're water on one side, forest on the other, and, you're just trying to survive. And here comes now the federal government that, you're hoping that maybe on the forest issue, you get a little help there or something. But now coming in with this thing as well, just one more, just seems like one more foot, kind of
yeah.
keeping people down and not giving anyone any options. And it's already just impossible to figure out, well, how are we going to grow in these communities and build more housing given the fact that we're sort of landlocked by these natural barriers? And then this comes in and says, oh, well, that land that you did have that was developable also now is essentially not developable because the mitigation requirements are so severe that you won't actually be able to do them. And so if you're a community like Seaside or Warrenton, I mean, you're just going to go into decline because you can't actually, you know, grow your community and have healthy homes and businesses and residents. What are you going to do?
Decline. I mean, they're already hard enough to make life happen in Seaside and Warrenton, to your point, right? To add this layer. Is this part of like, would this be, if they do one thing, especially for people that live there that have private, is this like the takings clause potentially? Like, would they have to pay me shouldn't the federal government, if this goes into effect, if they make me do something, I feel like they have to pay me.
Well, yeah. So I think there probably will be takings claims that are brought. But what FEMA says on that is, well, the NFIP is a voluntary program. We're setting minimum criteria for your community to be part of it, but we aren't actually setting these regulations. Like we're not the ones implementing these regulations. Now, there's long case law and stuff about, at what point does the federal government actually, use its power so strongly that it forces the local government to do it because you really can't survive without the NFIP. So, I think we'll see. I imagine those lawsuits will come, but that's FEMA's response to that argument.
Yeah, well, they just create another layer so they can say that they're not, whoa. Makes sense. Well, thanks, Jeremy. That's floodplainprotection.org.
Yep. Yep. Well,
Go
thanks for having me
there.
on. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk
Yeah,
about
no,
you
I mean,
guys.
well, home ownership. I mean, we're in a crisis. I don't know if people know that. We're in a we're in a housing crisis in Oregon. We try to remind people all the time, and usually when you're in a housing crisis, you don't do things to make it worse.
You'd think.
Yeah.
Oregon is constantly doing things to make it worse. There's just a few of us that are here trying to say, maybe don't do that stuff right
But
now.
to try to remind people all the time, like, guys, we're in a crisis and we're building less home. What are we building homes wise this year? Like maybe we're gonna hit 8,000.
Yeah,
It's
we've
bad.
been going down, down, down. Yep.
That is on a goal of 36,000.
But here's one everyone get behind. Everyone can get behind saying no to the federal government trying to make us do this, right? So everyone should be standing up for
Should be
Oregon's
bipartisan.
interests.
I hope it's bipartisan. I hope that people see that it's not doing anything to the habitat. This is silly. That's a silly argument. So let's just move on. We need the national flood. We need insurance protection. It's, super important. I mean, you'll destroy these cities if you don't have that. And if it becomes too costly that somebody can't afford it. That's what we're seeing in the wildfire zone with that sort of insurance that people can't even get it in some places, any sort of home ownership insurance. And that's just not feasible. All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Reagan and I are going to stay and hit some really controversial topics. You're welcome to stay and blast, but
Thanks, guys. Well, back to the Jewish topic. It's Rosh Hashanah, so I gotta
Oh,
go
okay.
pick up my daughter from school, and we're heading to dinner. And it's also my wife's birthday. So
Awesome.
happy birthday, Evan.
Happy. What's your wife's name again?
Happy birthday.
Evan.
Evan, yeah.
Yep.
She's kind of in the same business, isn't she?
Yeah. Yep. She does government affairs as well.
Oh, probably like Vicky and I. We go to blows sometimes over the dinner table. Good times. Good times. Well, thanks, Jeremy.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, see ya.
Brian, I'm glad we were able to cover that topic on the podcast. That's a critical one. And it's one that we have to make sure that people know about. And I think, Brian, we'll make our efforts. And I think through public comment, hopefully FEMA gets this back. FEMA's under different control now. My guess is under the first Trump administration, because you mentioned Obama and Biden. My guess is under the Trump administration, the first time what they try to do is delay it. But if they do that again, that could actually cause more damage. So what they really need to do is have this come back. FEMA disagrees with the other group and then reverts back to what we were at before. And so hopefully they can get that done.
I love it when they say, like he said, that FEMA by statute, and we have this as well, they must consider comments. That doesn't mean they have to. They considered them, even if they're like our gas tax. What is it? 97% is against it of public
Yeah,
comments that are coming in. Well, they've considered it, Reagan, and they decided that the 97% are stupid and they don't know what they're talking about. So we're just going to go ahead and do what we want to do anyways. And I think that's basically what happens here on this level. Like every comment could come into FEMA and saying, this is dumb. What are you doing? They'll still do whatever the staff decides to do at the time. And that should be the political prowess. That's why I hope that, these regionals or whoever they are, the problem that we have when you're in early in these Trump organizations like we are this time around, they've done a better job than previous years, but it's so hard to get down to that regional level of getting the appointments and all the staff turned over that you have that's what I was saying, that bureaucratic slow mud down the hillside. It's so hard and all those guys want to do is just keep their job. They don't even give a crap who's president. It's just about them keeping the pay coming in and keeping the job, and they're just moving it forward. They're not political.
that's right.
Left or right. They're just political their job. And that's where Trump, I think an executive order to just say stop all of these things. Because I can't imagine 10% out of the whatever are probably decent ones moving forward. The rest probably should just go away. I don't know how he does an executive order just to stop it all, but
well, and this is the lesson too. When you create giant bureaucracy and you think it's only going to be used for one thing, and then it gets used against you, whoa, yikes. All of a sudden, it's not so great to have a large bureaucracy. Kind of like with the FCC having control over the airwaves, kind of going into one of the topics that I wanted to cover this week. So, and it was just announced in our fascist country that Jimmy Kimmel gets to come back on the air. I don't even know how that's possible. I heard his show was canceled. That was not true. It was suspended by Disney. And now his show is coming back. And I was told that Disney suspending his show was just outright fascism. Well, it turns out that's what happened. So Jimmy Kimmel goes on the air. I think it was a week ago, Monday, today. And he says he has some comments, and you can go look at what the comments are. And then he did a joke, and I watched the video, and I think a lot of people are making more of it than actually was there. I didn't necessarily get terribly offended by his comments because Jimmy Kimmel isn't that funny. A lot of people are pretending like he's super controversial and stuff like that. But the biggest reason that he's a talk show host for Disney, which is usually an incredibly careful company. They don't want to be perceived as too right or too left. And now they've made some missteps on that front, but their goal is to remain apolitical so they can have the most number of customers, right? Michael Jordan's famous line about Republicans buy sneakers too. So they want Republicans to go to Disneyland. They want Republicans to go to Disney movies, that kind of thing, right? And Democrats, right? And so what you saw was a few years ago, they tried to get involved in Florida legislation, and it went really poorly, and Republicans boycotted them. Now, just recently, they took Jimmy Kimmel off the air briefly, and all of a sudden, Democrats are trying to cancel their Disney subscriptions and all this stuff. I saw that all through social media and stuff like that. So ultimately, though, what they got really upset about is the FCC commissioner went on and did an interview and said, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And they thought that meant he was going to pull the broadcast license for ABC, a company that's been on public airwaves for decades and decades without, a significant incident. I don't think that's what he meant, but even if you took it that way, I think what I would expect Democrats to do, and this goes to a broader discussion there was a long column, and I didn't read the whole thing, but I saw excerpts of it. Ezra Klein, who's kind of like a center-left thinker, he was basically like, if you think that fascism has come to this country and you're a Democrat, why would you demand that every Democrat candidate be down the line on every single issue? They have to be pro-abortion, they have to be anti-gun, they have to be pro-socialism, all that stuff. Wouldn't you want to win as many seats as possible and win some red states by, say, running a pro-life Democrat? That was his theory, and everyone was piling on and attacking him. And I was like, he has a point. That's the point. In fact, for decades, Democrats, during many Republican and Democrat presidents, they held the Congress for decades, and they did it primarily by having a lot of conservative Democrats.
Yeah.
But now they're totally opposed to any of those even when they run Democrats in red states, they're, yes, they served in the military, but they still support gun control. Yes, they're, Raphael Warnock's supposedly a pastor. He's still a pro-abortion pastor, okay? So these things that they try, and they try to pretend, but they don't change any of their values. Their values are down the line progressive. And it's like, well, you don't think people are going to figure that out? And they do. A lot of times, a lot of those candidates lose. Very few of them actually win, right? And they only win when it's like a close state. And so getting back to, Kimmel and the FCC, what I would have expected Democrats to do is said, wow, the FCC has way too much power if they can yank, a broadcaster's license for one segment on one show, right? Because you'd say, okay, you look at the totality of all of Disney's broadcasting, which isn't just Jimmy Kimmel. It's all kinds of other shows. It's sports. It's kids there's all kinds of stuff in there. And you're going to take their license for one thing? Well, first of all, that's not what they were going to do. That's just what people were assuming was going to happen, because their number one belief is Trump's a fascist and everything he does is fascist. And so they read fascism into everything that he's doing, this segment of the far left that's very vocal on social media. When you look at the reporting from the Hollywood Reporter and the Wall Street Journal, the reason Disney took his show off the air is because his plan was to go on the next day and make it worse. The reporting was that he was basically going to double down on all the criticism that he had gotten for his previous comments. And Disney, being not a terribly stupid company, went, I think that's going to go really poorly, especially the day after Charlie Kirk was murdered, or the few days after Charlie Kirk was murdered. It kind of doesn't matter what he says. So they obviously couldn't convince Kimmel not to say anything. And so the only way to stop him from saying anything was to pull his show, right? And you're already in a situation where the Colbert show was canceled. Okay. And all these late night shows get several hundreds of thousands of viewers. They are at all-time lows for viewership. This is not just Kimmel. This is everyone, because of the changes in TV. People do not watch late night TV anymore. They use social media for real-time updates. They don't use television for that. There's a lot of stuff they still consume, but they do it on streaming. They don't watch premieres of shows at the exact same time. They watch them the same week they premiere, not the same night. Not everybody's watching TV at the same time anymore. So having a late night show doesn't really make sense in the current media ecosystem. So these shows are on their way out. They're going to decline. The hosts are going to retire. They're not going to get renewed. They're not going to get replaced with younger talent. This is the end of late night TV. So why would you take a show that already isn't bringing you a ton of viewers and already isn't bringing in a ton of money and let them go out there and be controversial? Because it wasn't a kind of controversial that was going to gain them viewers. It was the wrong kind of controversial. It was going to be canceling Disney Plus subscriptions, right? So they're going to bring it back because the contract says they're going to bring it back. They bring him back tomorrow. I don't know what he's going to say. I'm assuming they've negotiated something. And then what's going to happen is he's going to finish his contract at the end of the year. And then Kimmel has already talked about retirement, and Disney probably just will decide not to renew his contract, and his show will disappear. And guarantee you, all the Democrats who said it was fascism taking him off the air will not watch his show. They will not keep it alive. They will not consume it for the final year because they don't care. They're just trying to find a label to attack the Trump administration. And sure, were the comments that Kimmel made insensitive? Yes. Does Disney deserve to pay by having their broadcast license pulled? No. And that's not what happened. You can say that the FCC commissioner went a little bit too far. It looks like he was cleaning up some of his comments today, right? But like, somebody saying something out of line doesn't equal fascism, is my whole point. And that's why I was so irritated with this whole process and everything that was going. Everybody takes things, they go from 0 to 100 with Trump every time. It's just every time they go all the way to 100 or past 100. And these guys have to figure out, if you want to beat Trump, you can't make every little thing, or you want to beat his movement that runs the next candidate, you want to beat him in the midterms, you can't make everything fascism, because everything isn't fascism. You could throw out there a couple of things that you think is actual fascism, or rather just argue it's bad policy, because that's really, people aren't going to vote based on pretending everything is fascism. And so, but these guys are just what they're going to do is they're going to accidentally lose the midterms, and Republicans are going to retain control of Congress, and then they're going to lose the presidency again in 2028 by becoming the boy who cried wolf party. And that's why Trump keeps beating them. That's why he almost beat Biden in 2020 despite coronavirus and everything else that was going on. I mean, people forget Joe Biden almost lost that election. Very nearly lost that election. So, like, I don't even know what they're talking about. And these guys have to get better at politics, and they have to get better fast if they ever want to win.
Well, I still think Trump won 2020, but call me one of the crazies. But
you are one of the crazies, Brian.
I mean, there's a late nights, there's bags in Pennsylvania. I don't know, reckon. But to bring your point down, I agree with what you said. The biggest thing, though, I thought that was important to this story was it wasn't Disney that initiated this. It was the KATUs of the world, like Portland, which is owned by Sinclair.
I forgot about that part.
Yeah,
yes, you're right.
Eugene. And I'm telling you, as somebody I've been in the media world, all of my professional career, buying media and stuff like that. It's been, let me give you Monday night on ABC. 5 o'clock, they do news from 5 to 5:30. They break to
local news, right?
5:30 to 6 to 7. They come back and do their local news. 7 to 8, they do the Wheel of Fortune, whatever crap, thing that's out there, right? And then they go to broadcast, gets thrown everything from 8 to 11. They get to do their news at 11 to 11:30. And then after that, they don't give a shit. It's called who cares? It's what we call in the media business dollar holler. Because for $1 you can holler and hope that somebody's paying attention, because from 11:30 to 6 a.m. nobody's watching broadcast. And that has been, these stations have all made their money from that 5 to 11:30 time frame for decades. Right. The model has not changed when, like you said, the entire climate of how people watch TV and how they consume TV. Jimmy Kimmel has more YouTube followers than 5 times who watch his TV show.
Right.
So the reality is his YouTube audience is bigger than his broadcast audience, to your whole point. So I think the reality is like these local stations like the KATUs and the KEZIs, they're screaming for ways to change up the environments because they're barely making any money. Like, these guys are not making money. The cost of buying a spot, or the cost to an advertiser of buying the spot, is artificially inflated by these local affiliates because they're quote unquote the only game in town. But as technology, we're seeing getting better, YouTube, all the digital TVs out there, right? The Hulus and all the things. It's getting better, and it's getting more cost effective. So is my ability as a buyer, say for your car dealership, keeps getting better for me to go somewhere else besides these broadcast affiliates. That's killing these guys. And they're saying either give us content that's not controversial so we don't have to sit here and talk to Betty Jones, who calls up all the time and complains about Jimmy Kimmel. That's kind of where all this started. It really was like a great, these guys were pissed. And I think that rightfully so, but these late night shows are just nothing but just left-wing shit. There's nothing funny in them anymore. They're not even, and somebody did a thing, it was like 96% of their guests are Democrats versus Republicans over the years. Like, you add them all up. I mean, don't quote me on the percentage, but it's overwhelmingly left, right? I mean, it's just overwhelmingly left.
Because it's a Hollywood echo chamber and a liberal New York echo chamber. And so, because you bring in the live audience of viewers is people from LA and New York, okay? And so those people are going to clap only for certain types and who they're not clapping for? Ben Shapiro and any other kind of conservative person you could bring on the show. They're not going to clap for Dennis Quaid, right? Those guys aren't interested in that. What they want to hear is what they already believe, and so that's what they do. And so they get applause in the audience, and they do very well with all of the folks in Hollywood that make sure that their shows continue, and they don't ruffling feathers with the major advertisers who all sell in the major cities, right? And have a lot of advertising in the major cities. Like it's a fine business model for them. It has resulted both, I think even if the media environment were static and I still had cable, which I do not, right? And network TV was still very prominent in people's lives. I still think these shows would be in decline because I think more and more censor and right people would have stopped watching them. But also the media ecosystem change has compounded that problem where no one's going to watch. So I think one of the things I think about, Brian, different generations, I think a lot of people, the TV was always on, or it was on for hours at certain points during the day, right? It was on when mom was working in the kitchen or something like that. Or it was on when dad got home from work. It was on in the morning before dad left for work, or whatever situation you had, right? And so you had like the early morning news was covered, and then you had evening news, and then you had, I remember I used to know all of the time slots on Fox News and all that stuff, right? I haven't watched Fox News since I left my parents' house because I haven't had cable since I left my parents' house. Oh, not true. Technically, I got it for free at one apartment, but I never used it. So I only turn on the television when I'm starting a show for myself or my wife or my kids. And that's the only time the TV goes on. What is more constant in my house is podcasts, social media, background noise like that, right? And so that's not any of these late night shows, right? It might be occasionally a clip from these late night shows, but usually it's when things are going viral like this and going really poorly, or it's like the one funny skit SNL produces every year. Now they do one time to make fun of Democrats, and then it's really funny. Or it's resharing the skit of Dave Chappelle when Donald Trump won in 2016, one of the best skits of all time from SNL. It's pretty dang funny, but. Yeah, so the media ecosystem is changing. All of these, you're talking about the local affiliates, the Next Stars and the Sinclairs. Most of their stations are not New York and LA. They're red state, middle Americas. So, of course, they're going to have to say, yeah, we're just going to pull this before we lose even more subscribers than we're already going to this next year.
I think this solve all this problem, and a few people have chatted about it, but I do believe that we should just, a good way for the government to make some money. We should just sell the bands, instead of giving them these licenses for free, because they'll, in turn for that freedom, they get, blah, 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 like the public good stuff. Because that's the only stick, right, that the Trump administration is able to wield, is because of the license that these guys have, versus like a Fox News, you're on cable or whatever. You can say whatever you want. You can be offensive all day long. It's freedom of speech, doesn't matter. But even then, they got rid of Tucker Carlson because, Tucker went a little too far for the corporation, for the company that said, you are not representing our brand how we want to be represented. That was the problem. And I think we could just solve all this problem by just sell everybody these licenses. Let's go make a few billion, some billions of dollars for the government, and then let Disney compete in the argument of ideas, compete in the marketplace for people's eyeballs. And if they can make money off of Jimmy Kimmel spewing whatever he wants to spew, or any of the other Jimmys, because they're all named Jimmy on late night or whatever, fine with me. I don't care. Like, I'm totally, me, I fall asleep at like 9:30. I don't get past.
And your point is so good, Brian, but here's the thing. I haven't seen a single Democrat say that. I haven't seen a single Democrat say, actually, maybe we don't need the FCC, or maybe we don't need the FCC to regulate airways. No, they don't say that. All they say is they're abusing their power. It's like, well, what if you just took away their power? Then they wouldn't be able to abuse it. And this has been the small government conservative argument for years and years and years. And you would think at some point Democrats go, maybe we should adopt and make the president a little less powerful. Maybe we should return some of those powers to duly elected Congress, which we can, sometimes win and all that stuff. No, they don't do any of that. They don't talk about any of that.
Couldn't agree more. The media landscape, and this is what media has to, the whole goal in life is, can I build a mousetrap that I capture eyeballs that I can then sell to people because they want to promote their product to my eyeballs, right? So, and there's obviously left and right to that. I mean, social media is a great example, right? If you get caught watching, I don't know, Charlie Kirk stuff, let's say now that fills up my Instagram, right? With Charlie Kirk's, now all of a sudden I'm getting shop and buy, Freedom t-shirts with Charlie Kirk, right? So that person knows. So that's a great mousetrap, right? They know that I'm a captive audience to that, and so they're selling me that. And I think that we have to treat these broadcast companies the same way and just sell the bands to all of these local affiliates, to all these people. Let's generate some billions of dollars, take away, and then let them spew whatever they want to spew. And if Jimmy Kimmel can build an audience that Disney can sell to whoever they want to on that platform, God bless them. Fine with me. I mean, heck, Reagan, we do campaigns, and like, I will buy media sometimes based on if I'm trying to reach left benting kind of stuff. So a lot of times, besides just demographics, one of those things you look at is like, well, late night TV kind of generates more left to center audiences. And so, maybe I'll look at buying that in a purple district. So, why not exploit that even more so on digital and all the other things you could do if you weren't regulated by the FCC? So I think it's a good opportunity for us to have this conversation about media and getting rid of the FCC altogether. There was a time and a place, but now we have the internet. We got satellites all above us. We got all these sort of things. It's basically an obsolete medium. Like my kids, like your generation. What are you? Are you Y?
Millennial. I don't remember what the letter is that goes with it.
I think you're kind of the lost generation, as we like to say, right? Between X and now the generation Alpha, which is my son. So, but you're not a normal one. You're a little different. But
yes, Gen Y. Yeah,
Gen
right.
Y. You're Gen Y. Okay, so and then we had Gen Z, and now they're done, and now we're Gen Alpha's like 19 and younger. But your generation, I would say, and below, doesn't have cable, doesn't have dish, doesn't have, so the reality is, and they're not going to put rabbit ears up on there. So they're not getting it over the airways. So it's all just dumb anyways and obsolete. So just do away with it and try to make a few bucks and not worry about it. So
it's exactly right.
And let it be. I think it's really, because to your point, it just becomes this crazy like left-wing talking point where everything's Trump's fault. If that rains tomorrow, it's Trump's fault. It's this and it's fascism. And it's just, I think people are growing a deaf ear to it. And
correct.
God bless the Democrats for being stupid and 58 of you voting against the Charlie Kirk resolution when all Republicans voted for the resolution when the Democrats were shot in Minnesota.
And also, I saw people on social media say they didn't see any Republicans put out statements. That is not true. Both Oregon Republican leaders put out statements when the Minnesota leaders got shot. Now, I understand that Oregon is not the biggest state, but it's just lazy. They're lazy out there and didn't bother to go check that anybody put out a statement. I am sure countless Republican state legislative leaders put out statements about that, because that obviously hits very close to home. And we had some bomb threats right after Charlie Kirk, or right before Charlie Kirk, against some Democrat senators in Oregon. All of it's bad. All of it is and should be condemned. And I think what's super interesting is how afraid Democrats are, not of conservatives and independents, but very clearly afraid of their own left flank, because that's the only reason that you abstain from voting or vote present on that Charlie Kirk resolution, is being afraid of a primary and what happens to you on the left flank. Same thing with how they're handling Israel. Even the ones who support Israel are very, very quiet right now. They're all afraid of primaries. And there's certainly a lot of social media attention on that front. I don't think it actually translates to a lot of voters, but we will see. I mean, there's definitely a concerted effort to primary a lot of the old Democrats. I've seen some of that in safe seats. We'll see if any of that spreads and how effective that stuff is. I mean, it's still pretty hard to beat an incumbent, even when they're old. So we'll see what Democrats are able to do. The problem
in Oregon, Reagan, to your point, the 5 Congress people that all voted present on the Charlie Kirk, they might as well voted no. They voted present, all 5 Democrats. If the situation was, and there was not one headline, all 5 Democrats vote present on Charlie Kirk, but not one headline, not one story, Not one thing from any of our left-wing media in Oregon, not one. But I guarantee if Cliff Pence voted no when the Democrat senators were shot,
Oh, it'd
he
be in every
voted no and
paper.
the other ones voted yes, it would be on every headline across the state. And that is part of the problem is we don't have honest media that is putting out the truth and the facts in Oregon, and they're just burying it. And they're not saying who those five, all five.
I don't even think, frankly, Brian, that this particular one is left wing bias, not overt left wing bias. It's not like they all saw the vote and went, wow, I'm not reporting on that. I'm going to help the Democrats. No, it's that they're so liberal, they don't even realize that that was a story. It didn't even register for them that that should have been reported. And that's the true bias. It's not the bias of I'm here to help
Yeah.
the Democrats and so I'm going to bury it. No, it's the bias in their minds of that's not a story. Why would I write about that? That's not even important. When there's like at least 45% of Oregon that would be like, oh, that's weird. Why would you do that? That's kind of, a pretty big statement to make. Even if you don't think, and I saw plenty of this where it's like, who's Charlie Kirk? He's not famous, whatever. And it's like, listen, I'm almost too old to know who Charlie Kirk is, and I'm 30. Okay, it's a different generation, but he obviously mattered a ton to those folks. Okay. And I have no way of verifying this. I don't know. A lot of people are saying that memorial service was as well attended as MLK and JFK, right? If that's even remotely close to true, he was way more famous than a lot of us were giving him credit for, way more influential than the media has given him credit for. And the folks who aren't covering the story are showing how bad they are at journalism by not actually covering the story or covering the Oregon side of the story, right? I haven't seen any stories written, hardly. Maybe I'm missing them about Turning Point USA chapters. We both know a bunch of people who were involved in the very early stages of the Turning Point USA chapter. I was a campaign in Albany, Corvallis when Turning Point USA got started at OSU and U of O, right? That's how,
Yeah.
that's where I was at. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't know much about the organization. I knew some friends that were involved. I thought it was interesting, right? That's all I knew. But no one went to go find those stories for Oregon media either. Okay. So that's the part where it's just like, again, the bias is both they're too old and too liberal to realize that this mattered. And something's got to happen if you want to preserve journalism at all, right? Journalism's already been significantly decimated based on business model. And the reason Republicans don't read media is it's not relevant to us because no one's looking for the stories that matter to Republicans. They're only writing the stories that matter mostly to people who live in Portland and then people who are Democrats.
Well,
And
their echo, like
like
you said, their echo chamber.
it's
Right?
it's just an echo chamber, right? It's them sitting in the Pearl District of Portland saying, "Hey, I don't see any crime here. How could there be any crime?" Well, have you checked any other part of Portland? Have you considered doing that? Have you driven? I drove to La Grande. I drove through Portland. Yeah, it still looks like Portland. Still looks not safe. So
Did you see they're trying to auction off that Gordon's Fireplace store again? The one that's just full of graffiti and all just completely trashed on I-84. Nobody bought it last time. They're putting it back.
I'm waiting for the full recession to hit so I can buy it at the bottom for like $1.
I think it would cost you more than $1. I mean, the amount of money it costs you to tear that down and rebuild it is just insane.
Oh yeah, the tax bill alone.
I think real quick before we call it a day, I just wanted to get your thoughts. Did you watch any of that? I know you were in La Grande as a fill-in pastor. Did you have a chance to watch any of the highlights from Charlie Kirk?
I've seen some clips. I've seen Erica Kirk's speech, which obviously was very moving. I saw Trump's speech, which was very Trump, as in not on message totally 100% of the time. And those were kind of the main two that were circulating through my feeds, and I was able to catch clips of that. I think those were probably two of the more important ones, obviously most relevant. Marco Rubio, talked about Jesus being the savior, and that's obviously I was really impressed by his words. I thought they were very good.
Yeah, it was Alex. I was telling Jeremy earlier that Alex was there, our oldest son. He goes to school at Grand Canyon University, and he got to meet Charlie last year down there. And so it was really important for him to go. He got up at 3:45 to get in line. to get in there. And so he was inside, and he goes, Dad, it was like this Christian rock concert for 3.5 hours. There was every major Christian group was that he's aware of, right, was there. Chris Tomlin, all of them were singing, and he was like, it was great. And it was all free. He goes, I got to go to a rock. He goes, but it was way more of like a memorial than more like a revival. And he was really moved by it. And he's 19. He's in that age range that Charlie was trying to speak to. And Vicky and I watched a lot of it yesterday, in and out. And Erica she's just awesome. Like she's what she's learning to do, or learned to do, or did. I don't know if it's one of those things, but her pivot on talking about family, and what Charlie used to talk about is, kids be coming out of college wanting to buy a house, wanting to have the American dream. And then her talking about, men be men and women be women, and really know that together is the way to go, and all the things. It was super moving. Definitely got me teary a couple of times in there, and Trump's stuff he was great though. His best line was, he was talking about, it was very Trumpian, but he was real honest when he goes, Charlie always would forgive his enemies and stuff like that. He goes, but not me. I hate my enemies. And he kind of smiled, and he was just like, talking about, it was like his way of like saying how great Charlie was, and really saying Charlie was a better man than Trump was. That's like that. Trump's never going to say that, but that was basically what he was saying. He's a better man than me because I don't forgive my enemies. And it was kind of funny, but he did a good job, I think, of honoring Charlie enough to kind of walk through his life, as well as also being Trump a little. The weave was definitely there. I don't know. I want to read his teleprompter while he gives a speech sometime. I would really love to see how much he goes off script and then comes back to it. That's got to be the hardest job in the world for the person that's running the teleprompter.
I can't imagine telling that they had the cure for your autism was supposed to be a part of that, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know his media strategy. It's very different. I think the one speech that I saw a little clip of that I was just like, okay, was like you're pointed out before. You talked about Tucker Carlson and how he was going too far, and so Fox let him go. And Tucker still thinks Israel killed Charlie Kirk. And and same thing with Candace Owens. I don't understand that whatsoever. You really have to twist yourself into knots to get there. I really don't. I mean, I've been talking with people about this because obviously everybody's got different theories. It's pretty clear. So first of all, people are talking about Mossad, and they are an incredibly good organization. If they were trying to silence somebody, his car would just blow up. His car would run off the road and kill him. Right? He would die in a not an obviously martyr death. Like the CIA and all these other, the KGB, they all know how to not kill somebody and turn them into an icon. Okay. And so if you're going to tell me with a straight face that any government killed this guy to silence him, they quite literally did the opposite by killing him. That's how you know this guy was a lone wolf and he was just nuts and all this stuff. Like, that's how you know, like, it just doesn't stand up to even basic scrutiny. You're like, oh, so he killed Israel. And then all that's going to go forward is a bunch of teaching about the Bible, which also teaches about Israel and shares about Israel. Like, do you even hear yourself when you say this stuff? And that's the part of it that, again, we really need to get on, making sure that conspiracy theorists understand we've put them in the corner and that's where they all belong. And they're not to come out of the corner until they apologize. Because it's a distraction. I mean, even if it was, let's just say, even if it was controversial, if it's not clear that another country killed him, why would you just go up there and take away from his memorial and say that? Like, that's just insane. If my dad passed away, I'm not going to go up there and be like, well, I think Kate Brown killed him, probably. Right? Like, that's nuts. Even if that's what I thought for some reason, because, he had his coffee cup there or whatever. Yeah. Again, it's the weirdest. I don't understand it. And that's why it's like the free market sorts all this out. There's a reason Tucker doesn't have a show. There's a reason Candace Owens was a rising star and has now just plummeted. The bottom has plummeted out from under her. Like, the free market handles all this stuff, and it will do it, because people who go crazy go into their hole and be crazy, and then go be crazy on the internet and still make a living. And, I want people to be able to pay their bills. So congratulations, I guess. But I'm not participating in it.
I'm with you. I don't think that is real. I mean, I don't like killing Charlie Kirk. I mean,
Goodness.
I think what was very telling to me is like Charlie Kirk was a very accessible human being. Like he was very accessible, meaning like you could email the guy, you could see him, touch him on campus. But that's also what made Charlie Kirk, is that he knew he had to be accessible to these kids. He had to speak to them, and he had to, be on their campus. And like he even said, like they hated him doing the quads and all the things, but he's like, he wanted to grab the passerby, the kid that was not paying attention, that didn't want to go there and was already bought in on MAGA. He actually wanted the kids that weren't. And that's what made him Charlie Kirk, right? But that's also what killed him, because he's not an elected official. So he doesn't get, people always say, well, how the security, he only had whatever security he could afford, because he's not given security because he's not an elected official on any level. So
it sounded like, based on some of the reporting I was reading, over the last year, he had gotten more death threats. And so he or Turning Point started paying for some security for him. But that was a fairly recent phenomenon. It very obviously wasn't presidential level security. It was famous speaker level security. Those are very different things. Even, do you remember, were you at the Reagan dinner with Pence? I mean, that was former vice president security, which isn't Secret Service, but I would imagine it was very close to Secret Service level, or some whatever you could get private level that was at that point, because he was obviously very recently just the vice president. So I think that it was clear that his protection was not even that good. And even when you have Secret Service level protection, you can still get shot at, as we've seen many, many times. So anyway, I think that just, people, I think the internet, it's done a lot of good, and it also causes a lot of people to get together and have very unhealthy conversations. Unfortunately.
It sickens me with the Charlie Kirk stuff. I'm not sure where it really goes from here. This sickens me on just this idea that you can show up and, and shoot a legislator in their house in Minnesota, or a Charlie Kirk, or, that sort of stuff. It's not gun control. It's not stop with all of that crap. Just be real and realize that this is what I know, Reagan, that God is real. God is everywhere. But that also means evil is real, and evil is everywhere. And so the true battle in life is good versus evil. And this kid was filled with evil, that he let open a crack into his soul, and the evil jumped in there. The devil jumped in there through whatever means, social media, all that sort of stuff, and got him to the point to where his anger was so intense that he wanted to take another person's life. And that is what's sickening to me, especially a person's life who was just trying to debate, who was a dad, a husband, building something, and he cared about America, like in a way that maybe went against other people's vision of what that America was. But that's the fun part about America. America has shifted and swung on a pendulum for decades and decades, left and right, and moving back and forth. And until we stop realizing that it's my way or death, it's just my way today. I can remember, I know you can't because you weren't born. I can remember, well, maybe you were barely, when we had 2/3 veto-proof Republican majorities in Oregon. And that wasn't that long ago. Mid-90s. I was even already out of high school. We had 2/3 swing-proof or veto-proof majorities in the legislature in Oregon. And then things shifted the other way, and it doesn't mean they won't shift back. And I think if the Democrats hold on to these hard truths, I feel like we could debunk history this midterm and actually win in a midterm because we may be on the brink of a social cultural revolution that the Democrats just aren't seeing.
Well, and this is also why, you try to use your conventional wisdom and you say it's a second term and it's going to be a bad midterm. And it's like, well, you also can't account for stuff like this that happens.
Yeah.
And that's why politics is always changing. That's why you always have to be ready to react and adjust, because there's going to be new stuff that happens, right? And that can totally change up the landscape. And I think the biggest thing that we learned from the 2024 election is Democrats aren't prepared to adjust for the new landscape yet. They're not adjusting for the change with white working class voters. They are not adjusting for the change with non-white voters that are moving Republican, right? And even then, I mean, we're seeing some signs that even some of the suburban areas may tilt back Republican here at some point, based on some of the things that Trump has done. I don't know that they'll go all the way back to how Republican they were, but even if they start tilting back, there's literally nowhere else for Democrats to go for voters, basically, at that point. Well, and so they'll have to go through a full reinvention then, and they're going to lose more elections in the meantime and the voters are going to punish them until they fix it. And it's the same. And you know why I can speak in this? Because it's happening to Oregon Republicans. We continually are getting beaten, and we refuse to reinvent ourselves in a way that voters find attractive. And until we do, they're going to punish us.
Yeah, I was literally going to go there. Yeah, and just realize that, and I think we're seeing that shift, but we have to get ourselves out of it. And I think the Democrats in Oregon, and I was speaking Oregon specific, they're kind of saying, well, we don't have to change because we're not losing. I mean, heck, we can sit here and people like Cyrus Javity are coming to our banner. So what we have to push to change as Republicans and say, we've changed. We're now the party of the people. Come check out our side. We're open to ideas. We're not closed off to ideas. We want debate, but here's our core principles, right? Smaller government, getting out of your hair, less taxes, all the things, right? And better opportunity, really, because that's what everybody wants. So we just need to be better at it. Maybe we'll dive into that in the next podcast or two. We'll talk about, kind of like what platform. Like we should read the Oregon Democrat and Republican platforms. No,
Brian, we should not, because those platform documents are pointless and useless and nobody reads them. Those have nothing to do with what people think the actual parties believe. That's the thing, is I get so tired of these arguments now. I'm so done with platform fights.
We're doing it, Reagan. We're doing a platform.
No, I don't want to do. Fine, I'll debate the platforms, but I'm on the side of platforms don't matter, and I tell that to every time. It's so funny because the Lynn County Republicans and different local groups, I'm sure out there in Crook, they all get spun up about the platform, and I always intended to respond to these big group emails and go, the platform doesn't matter, and then just leave. But I know it makes them so upset because they're playing mock government when they do this, and it's just I need them. I need people to understand how a traditional even an average Republican voter. The average Republican voter has not read the platform. That is not why they are Republican.
I took the Republican platform and I made it one page.
Yeah.
And I bet my platform covers everything and it's one page. And then I get those emails from the platform convention people, and it's just because everybody's got to argue. Same thing with the Farm Bureau. Like, it drives me crazy with their policy book that's like 9,000 pages full of a bunch of crap that nobody's ever going to read and nobody gives a crap about, and they want to change one word. And I remember in 2019 or 20, there was a bunch of people that wanted to change stuff in there because it started to talk about, it was really after like the Me Too stuff, and we were getting into the George Floyd stuff. Yeah, it was 2020 because it was after that. And like, well, this inflammatory language makes it very difficult for us as lobbyists to get into Democrat offices because it's got this inflammatory language in the platform or the policy. I'm like, are you kidding me? What? Not Republicans or anybody in this room has read that damn book, let alone Democrats. Like, they don't care. Like, stop this crap. Like, this is just crap. Like, your platform should be like one page. It should be a one-pager, right?
Trump did that to the National Republican
make
platform.
it simple. Simple,
So,
simple, stupid, right? I mean, that's how you just have to make it and just say, especially if you want a populist movement because you want everybody in there. And maybe that's what we have to do is we should say, if I was, well, we'll give, maybe you can take the Republican one and I'll take the Democrat one and we can like rewrite it. I haven't even seen the Democrat one. I wouldn't even know what their platform says, to be honest. I've never even looked at it. I'm sure it says abortion is true. We love drive-through abortion stores. We love, free borders. I don't know. I mean, but maybe we should.
sure. Yes.
It
I
probably
think
has
that
a
would
lot
be
more
fun.
better language in there, but I should go look and see what it says, but I'll bring it
I
next time.
know I've read it, and here's the thing, Brian. I know I've read it, and I can't tell you what it says. And because everything I know about Democrats is not based on that document. It is
Yeah,
based on what they do and what they say,
yeah.
and a lot more what they do than what they say. Because a lot of times what they say is they believe in jobs and small business and the economy and all that stuff, and then they just do all the opposite
Yeah.
of things that would help those guys. So that, I mean, that's the other thing too, is it's like you can say all this stuff about your platform, but that the next thing is, and Democrats and Republicans do this too, they demand all of their legislators adhere to the platform. And I'm like, that's not why any of these people got elected.
No,
No voter went, I'm going to vote for this person because they believe the platform the most accurate. No,
no.
that none of that happened. Shares your values? Yes, but not the platform.
To be
And
honest, I
so
couldn't tell you what's in the Republican Party platform either. So,
I think no tax on tips is on there now, I think.
whoop,
But yeah,
whoop. I know.
yeah.
And that stuff shouldn't be on there because that's just a fad, right?
Yeah, also
It's-
true.
It shouldn't be on a
Also
platform.
true.
It shouldn't be.
A fad that will cost Oregon $888 million in the next biennium.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to see. So next week is legislative days. I'm going to do this really fast. One of the biggest, probably the biggest conversation is, can Democrats call another special session or just keep the same one open for,
Yeah,
months
might
and
as well.
months? I mean, they finally figured out how to do it, Brian, how to have never ending session. We don't even have to worry about sine die. We just open special session and never close it. We can introduce stuff. But anyway, they want to disconnect. Democrats want to disconnect from some Democrats. I don't think all of them do actually want to disconnect from some of these new federal definitions on income, because right now we automatically connect. And so our definitions of incomes are the same. So anytime the feds do stuff that reduces how much taxable income there is, it reduces taxable income in Oregon, which reduces government collections. And they only set aside about $500 million for ending fund balance instead of $1 billion. There were some Republicans even who were on their way out of the legislature who may have recommended the Democrats keep some extra money around, and they didn't do it. I'm sure they tried and they just couldn't do it. And now they have to figure out, they have to do it in special session, because if they wait until short, they will lose half of that, the $444 million, because everyone will have already completed their tax filings. And I'm pretty sure Democrats aren't going to force everybody to refile their state taxes after the fact. That would be a logistical disaster. I don't even think the new director of the Department of Revenue, David Gerstenfeld, wants to even entertain that. I think he will stomp on that immediately. So maybe they wait till short and they only disconnect for half a biennium, right? It still puts them in a decent sized budget hole. The governor just sent agencies a letter that said no more out of state travel, reduce your use of services and supplies, and keep your open positions open. Brian, there is some really bad budget news hanging out in a document of a draft somewhere, and it's going to go live at some point, and it is going to blow up Democrats' dreams, their budget dreams. That's all I can. That's what I feel from this. The governor does not send a letter to every agency and tell them, you better start saving. You better start saving right now, if there isn't some really bad budget news coming here soon.
We're going to have to talk about the budget stuff. I mean, when it comes out, because that's going to be fun. But I think we got a lot of episodes to do. I guess we're going to podcast again. But I got to head into Coos Bay for the Economic Summit at the end of this week. So that'll be fun. Going down there, and then we have special sessions / ledge days, and I'll end it on this one. We got an email for a hold for potential floor on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Yeah, and you completely foobarred my calendar.
I know.
For committees now. I'm going to have to go rearrange all the meetings I set based on my open times. I'm super excited.
I got meetings,
but it is hilarious.
Too. I don't even know. And I just told everybody's email, and I'm like, I have no idea. We'll see.
It'll be hilarious. Honestly, they're just out there putting on a clinic on how not to run a legislature, and I'm constantly amazed at how they continue to double down on a strategy that is not working for them right now. This is why you don't make laws by one vote. This is why you don't run the state on a single party majority. You should work with members of the other party. It doesn't have to be everyone. I'm not saying all of our people are 100% right all the time or are all reasonable, but there's definitely reasonable members of our party. And when the reasonable moderate Republicans are getting shut out, something is going very wrong. So I'm interested to see how they pull this out of the hat.
And when will the Democrat majority realize in the legislature that they're a third branch of government and they're not there to do the bidding of the governor? Like, when will they put their foot down and just say, it's not there. It's not going to happen. Like, we're not here. Like, just because you were Speaker of the House doesn't mean you get to be Speaker of the House when you're the governor. Like, go away. Like, sorry, people don't want this. And you can't just keep wedging it until you can make it happen. So I'm hoping that it'll translate to, lost seats in the general, but we'll see. I don't know. A year from now, people's attention and their memory. Yep. We'll just have to keep reminding them here on Crosstabs. Go take care of your kids. Brian. Probably dark out now. We've been going for like 2 hours. This might be the longest podcast that we've done so far. So we're getting into Joe Rogan territory at this point.
We're just going to have to rename Crosstab Reagan and Brian's Rants because that's what we're doing here. But it's the best content we've ever had, Brian. I'm convinced.